courtroom was packed with silence, but the lies were louder than anything I'd ever heard. Jane sat across from me, pearls on her neck, Jackson on her arm, both staring like I was the criminal. Beside them, my cousin Irene, the one who rented us her basement years ago, ready to swear under oath that I'd stolen my sister's children. Stolen. That's the word they used. 12 years ago, Jane left her kids with me. No diaper bag, nothing, saying, "I'll be right back. Just going to buy diapers." 2 hours, Cass, I'll be right back. She never came back. Now she wanted them back. Worse, she wanted the world to believe I had poisoned them, manipulated them, made them forget who their mother was. And for a moment, watching the judge flip through her lawyer's papers, it almost looked like she was winning, until he reached for my envelope. He opened it slowly, read in silence, and leaned back in his chair. "Do they know what's inside?" he asked. I didn't look away. Not yet. "My name is Cassie. I'm 32, and I've decided I won't explain myself anymore. If you believe silence can speak louder than words, subscribe to Revenge with Suzi. It helps me reach more people and keeps me going to bring you more stories like this. And tell me in the comments, would you have done anything differently?" It started on a gray Thursday, the kind of day when the sky pressed down like wet wool and the air inside Irene's house smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage. I was in the basement we rented from her. Calling it an apartment would have been generous. Concrete walls, a single narrow window that looked out at dirt, rent due every Friday, always in cash, always counted twice. That's where Jane showed up, unannounced, her kids trailing behind her like shadows too small for their own bodies. Their shoes untied, hair tangled, faces smudged with the kind of dirt that doesn't wash off in one try. She didn't look at me when she pushed them through the door. 2 hours, Cass. I just need 2 hours, she said, already backing away. The toddler wrapped himself around my leg. The baby cried until my shirt was damp with tears and spit. I asked her where she was going. She gave me the kind of smile you use when you're already lying. "Don't make a thing of it. I'll be right back." And then she was gone. I stood there with 3 children staring at me like I had answers I didn't. Noah came in from a shift he didn't have anymore, his jacket smelling of rain and rejection. He saw the kids and didn't even ask the question. We both knew what the silence meant. That night I called Jane 10 times, straight to voicemail. At 2 in the morning, the baby's cough rattled his chest so hard I thought he'd choke. By morning, I had no choice but to take them to the clinic. The nurse asked, "Parent or guardian?" I said, "I'm the one here." She didn't press. She just wrote my name on the line. That's how absence gets documented. One form, one signature. One long look from a stranger who knows you didn't plan for any of this. When I got back, Irene was waiting at the top of the basement stairs, arms crossed. "I didn't rent to a daycare," she said. "Noise travels. Don't make me regret this." I wanted to tell her we hadn't made the noise. Life had. But I kept my mouth shut. Silence is sometimes the only control left when everything else is slipping. That evening, I folded the clinic paperwork and slid it into a folder I didn't know I was starting. Paper doesn't argue. Paper doesn't lie. Paper just remembers. Noah held my hand in the dark later, whispering, "She's not coming back, is she?" I shook my head. The pipes groaned above us. Irene's footsteps heavy and impatient. It wasn't love or charity that anchored me then. It was something colder. The decision that 2 hours had already turned into forever. The first winter in Irene's basement felt like punishment. The pipes banged at odd hours, rattling like bones in a tin drum. Cold crept up through the floor no matter how high we stacked blankets. The kids slept huddled together, breaths fogging the narrow window that stared at nothing but dirt. Noah worked nights where he could, came home with fingers cracked from cold and hope thinner than his paycheck. I kept a folder on the table, slowly thickening with clinic slips, vaccination records, and school permission forms. Each one had my name where hers should have been. Parent, guardian. I didn't announce it, didn't brag. I just signed, slid the paper back, and carried the weight home. Jane's number was disconnected by Christmas. I found one message on social media. "You're dramatic." I said I'd be back. Nothing else. Like words could substitute for presence. Like silence didn't already raise her kids. Irene never missed a chance to remind me what I owed her. She'd knock on the basement door with nails tapping against the wood. "Rent. Full amount. And keep them quiet, this isn't a playground." She sniffed at the smell of soup I stretched into 3 meals. "Don't stink up my house." I wanted to tell her she didn't own the air. Instead, I swallowed the words and folded another clinic receipt into my folder. Paper has more patience than I do. One night, the baby's fever spiked. I carried him up the steps, past Irene's glare, into the freezing street and to the ER. The nurse asked again, "Mother?" I said nothing at first. Then, "I'm the one who stays." She wrote it down. Silence became identity. When Noah finally landed steady work, the relief in his shoulders almost broke me. We decided to leave. Irene didn't hide her satisfaction. "Good. I need tenants who don't bring baggage." She glanced at the kids like they were boxes stacked in the wrong corner. We packed in silence. I slid the last envelope of rent under her door with a note. "We're gone." She called an hour later. "You'll pay for damages? Carpets, noise, stains. You think leaving makes you right?" I let the voicemail sit. I didn't answer. Some debts don't deserve collection. That winter ended with us driving away from Irene's house in a second-hand car, the kids asleep in the back. Snow blurred the road ahead. I didn't know where Jane was, but I knew where her children were. Right there, warm under my care. Distance is supposed to heal. In reality, it just redraws the map of pain. Noah's new job brought us to a town where no one knew Jane, where her name was just ink on a birth certificate buried in a file. I registered the kids at school myself. The principal asked, "Who's the primary?" I said, "I am." No hesitation this time. She nodded and moved on, and that's how you rewrite a family. One box checked at a time. The kids adapted quicker than I did. They learned bus routes, playground rules, which teachers gave extra crackers at lunch. At home, they slipped into calling me mom in whispers at first, like testing a forbidden word. I didn't correct them. Names are choice, and I wasn't about to deny them that. Jane's shadow lingered in strange ways. Once, a neighbor mentioned seeing her name online connected to a boyfriend in another state. She looked wild, the neighbor said, then quickly changed the subject. I didn't chase it. If Jane wanted to be invisible, I wasn't about to drag her back into view. Irene hadn't forgotten us. A letter arrived claiming unpaid damages for her basement. She listed scuffs, chipped paint, and emotional harm from having children under her roof. At the bottom, in shaky script, "Jane has rights. You stole her life." My hands shook as I read. Noah tore it up. I fished the pieces back out and taped them flat. I keep everything. Paper never flinches. Years blurred, birthdays stacked, first steps, first report cards, first heartbreaks. I signed every permission slip, every ER wristband, every late slip. Jane didn't appear for any of them. Absence became a pattern, and patterns harden into truth. Still, at night, I'd wonder what story she was telling herself. Did she imagine she'd been shut out? Did she rewrite me as the villain so she could look in the mirror? Distance gave her the freedom to pretend. It gave me the burden of proof. One evening, the oldest asked if they were supposed to call me Aunt when filling out a form. I looked at the paper, then at him. "You write what feels right," I said. He wrote, "Mom." I didn't stop him. Jane didn't knock. A man in a suit did. He said my name like it belonged to the courthouse already and handed me a packet thick enough to bruise. I watched his car idle at the curb while the kids finished their cereal. The oldest read the word petitioner out loud and went quiet. I put the papers face down as if the print could stain the table. 2 days later, Jane arrived with Jackson, pearl earrings catching the light like they were evidence of innocence. He didn't introduce himself. His watch did. He looked over my shoulder into our house. At the shoes by the door, the drawings taped to the fridge, cataloging what he thought I'd stolen. "You took advantage," he said, voice smooth, verdict preloaded. "You controlled access. You made them forget their mother." "They didn't forget," I said. "They remembered who stayed." Jane clutched her bag to her chest like I might take that too. "You moved them," she said, as if geography were a crime. "You wouldn't let me visit. You told them to call you Mom." In the doorway, my middle one froze with a spoon in his hand. Jane turned her face toward him like a camera finding its shot. "Baby," she said, voice suddenly soft. "Do you remember me?" He didn't answer. He looked at me, then at the bowl, and I watched the moment something in him chose silence over spectacle. He set the spoon down and left the room on his own feet. I didn't argue on the porch. Arguing is for people who need to be believed. I needed to be precise. After they left, I called a lawyer whose office smelled like dust and strong coffee. He listened without blinking, then pushed a legal pad toward me. "Court is theater," he said. "The side with the clearest story wins. The truth helps, but story wins." I opened the file folder I'd been building for 12 years. Clinic wristbands with my initials, school forms where the line for mother stayed blank, report cards mailed to my address. He nodded like a man who sees a map where someone else saw clutter. Good, he said, tapping the stack, but they'll say you blocked contact. They'll bring someone to swear it. As if summoned, Irene texted me an hour later. Heard Jane was over. Should have let her see her own kids when she tried. Courts don't like kidnappers. The words bit through the glass. Irene, my cousin, my former landlord, the woman who counted rent twice and called childhood noise a damage fee. I watched the message glow, then dim. I didn't reply. That night, I put the kids to bed early. The house hummed the way houses do when they're trying to hold a family together. Noah stood at the kitchen sink with his back to me, hands braced on the counter. We'll get through it, he said, not turning around, because we both knew promises are fragile when people with lawyers are involved. I cleaned the table, then checked the front door twice. After midnight, a notification blinked on my phone from a number I hadn't saved, but my body recognized before my mind did. A mutual friend. The one who once drove Jane to a place she didn't want to name. If she's dragging you to court, you'll need this, the message read. Back then, she asked me to handle paperwork. I kept a copy. She said she didn't want it in her bag. I think she knew she'd pretend it never happened. A photo attached. Not the whole thing. She was careful, but enough to see the letterhead, the dates, the signature that sat like a confession Jane never planned to give. My throat tightened. I didn't save the image to the cloud. I didn't forward it. I watched it the way you watch a storm approach, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. The next morning, Jackson stood across from me at the drop-off line like we belonged to the same town. He said without moving his lips, "It's over. You'll leave quietly, or you'll be embarrassed publicly." I saw his reflection in the minivan window. A man who thought money could erase memory. I didn't answer him either. I emailed my lawyer instead. We have more than forms. That afternoon, the kids' guidance counselor called to say a woman had shown up to request copies of their files, said she was the mother, just updating addresses. The office told her to bring ID and a court order. Jane left before the copier warmed. My hands shook only after I hung up. At home, I laid everything out on the kitchen table like evidence in a museum of absence. Papers, dates, signatures, a story without adjectives. I could feel Irene moving somewhere on the other side of town, telling anyone who would listen that I was selfish, that I wanted a life that wasn't mine. Let them talk. Contempt is loud, it burns itself out. Paper does not. Preparation looked ordinary from the outside. From the inside, it was control finally finding a form. I cleared the table and turned it into a workbench. The lamp cast a circle of light over two piles, the years I had lived and the years Jane had skipped. I started with the clinic. The receptionist there had gray hair and a stern kindness. "You've been bringing them since they were little," she said, printing a summary. I always wondered. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The stack came out warm from the machine, ink smelling faintly of ozone and the kind of memory that can be stapled. Next, school records. The secretary pulled attendance, contacts, the emergency forms that got updated every August. Mother line blank, every year. Primary contact, me. "Do you need a letter from the principal?" she asked. "Something that says who actually shows up?" I nodded. Specificity is kindness when people rewrite history for sport. At home, I found things I hadn't meant to save and realized I'd been saving them on purpose. Birthday invitations I'd signed, discharge papers from that night the youngest split his chin, a copy of the permission slip for the 6th grade trip where I checked, "Yes, my child will attend," without asking permission from a ghost. Noah made tea and kept me company the way you keep someone company through a storm. Quietly, by staying. "What else do you need?" he asked. "Besides sleep. Something they can't charm their way around," I said. The friend's text flashed in my head like a lighthouse. I didn't need the whole document. I needed the truth inside it acknowledged by someone who mattered. At 7 p.m., my phone rang with Irene's name. I let it go to voicemail, then listened on speaker. "Funny how you decide who gets to be a mother," she said. "Jane told me everything. You kept her away. You told the kids to be ashamed of her. Courts don't like witches, Cassie." Money clinked against glass in the background, like change being counted. Bargains have a sound. I saved the message and labeled it Irene, performance. The next day, I went to the library to copy everything. The copier groaned like it had lived 100 lives. Behind me, a boy coughed the cough of early fall. A girl whispered for more time on the computer. I stacked my copies carefully. One binder for the lawyer, one for me, one for the court. I wrote names on tabs with letters so neat they looked like someone else's hand. Health, school, contact, messages, and one tab with a single word, truth. On the way out, the guidance counselor called again. That woman came back. She brought a man this time, she said. Jackson, I imagined, wearing his watch as ID. We told them records go to the person who picks up. You've been the one who picks up. I thanked her and stood at the curb a little longer than I needed to, letting the traffic decide when I crossed. Some days' choice is just waiting for a safe gap. At home, the kids worked on homework at the same table where I sorted our life into paper. The oldest asked carefully, "Are we in trouble?" I told him no. I told him grown-ups make messes, and sometimes courts help clean them. He nodded like he didn't believe courts did much cleaning, but he believed me. Late that night, the friend texted again. If they question authenticity, I can come. I was there when she signed. She asked me to keep a copy because Jackson was around back then, and she didn't want him to know where she was. I stared at the message until it stopped shaking in my hands. People like to say, silence protects abusers. Sometimes it protects the person who's been doing the work too, until it's time to speak. I printed the screenshots of Jane's old messages. Handle it. I can't be a mom right now. The timestamps were older than the baby teeth in my keepsake jar. I printed Irene's voicemail transcript too. Let her hear her own performance in a room where microphones don't belong to her. Before I sealed the envelope, I added one last thing. A photo I keep in the kitchen drawer, the one taken that first week in Irene's basement. 3 kids asleep on a mattress, cheeks flushed from fever, a space heater glowing like a stubborn little sun. Not for drama, for memory, for me. I ran my palm over the outside of the manila and wrote truth on the tab. Then I placed the envelope in the center of the table and sat with it. I didn't pray. I didn't bargain. I noticed the way my breathing finally matched the room. Enough. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and stale coffee, but the air crackled with performance. The judge sat high above us, robes folding like curtains on a stage. The clerk called the case. I sat still, hands folded over the envelope on my lap, while Jane and Jackson whispered like actors timing their cues. Irene testified first. She wore a blazer that looked borrowed, stood straight as if posture could bleach history. She rented my basement, she began. She kept Jane away. I begged, to let the mother see her own children. She told me no. She controlled everything. She encouraged them to call her mom. It wasn't right. Her voice trembled just enough to sound rehearsed. I felt my jaw lock. The kids shifted behind me, my oldest tapping his shoe against the bench in rhythm with a heartbeat he didn't want to show. My lawyer rose, voice calm. Did you ever personally witness Jane try to visit the children? Irene blinked. She told me she tried. So you never actually saw it? I didn't need to. I knew. You knew because she said so? Irene flushed. For the first time, the performance cracked. The judge scribbled something without looking up. Then Jane took the stand. She looked the part of sorrow. Pearls, pressed blouse, eyes glistening as if grief had waited 12 years to ripen. I went through a hard time, she said. I trusted my sister. I thought she'd help until I was back on my feet. Instead, she decided I wasn't fit. She manipulated my children, erased me from their memory, replaced me in their lives. She moved them, hid them, poisoned them against me, and now they won't even look at me. Her voice broke on cue. Jackson squeezed her hand like applause. For a second, even I felt the room lean her way, sympathy bending toward the woman who finally showed up with a story. The judge turned to me. Do you wish to respond? I stood, walked forward, and placed the envelope on the rail. My fingers didn't shake. The judge slid it open, pulled out the papers one by one. School records, clinic notes, immunization cards with my name as contact, text from Jane. Handle it. I can't be a mom right now. Irene's voicemail transcript. Courts don't like witches, Cassie. The room shifted. Jane's posture stiffened. Jackson's jaw clenched. The judge lingered on one page longer than the rest. Then he looked up, glasses low on his nose. Ms. Jane, he said, voice level. Is this your signature on the rehabilitation admission dated 12 years ago? Jane froze. For once, silence belonged to her. Jackson leaned in, whispering something sharp. The kids behind me stopped breathing. Did you inform your sister where you were? Jane's lips barely moved. No. Did you authorize her to act for the children in your absence? She blinked hard. I told her to handle it. The judge leaned back. Then she did? The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. It was the sound of a lie collapsing under its own weight. People expect fireworks when truth lands. Mostly it's quiet, like dust settling after a demolition. The judge issued his order with words that sounded plain, but carried the weight of years. Stability recognized. Contact defined by the children's needs, not Jane's performance. Jane avoided my eyes as she left the stand. Jackson followed, jaw set in a line that looked less like victory and more like cost. Irene didn't even look at me. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, as if the carpet could forgive her testimony. Outside, the air was sharp with early spring. The kids clustered around me, eyes searching for what came next. "Are we safe?" the youngest asked. I said yes. Not because courts make anyone safe, but because I'd decided that night in Irene's basement 12 years ago that I'd never let them be alone again. Noah drove us home in silence, his hand brushing mine on the gear shift. It felt like the first unclenched moment in years. Jane left me one voicemail later that week. Her voice was smaller than the one she used on the stand. "You poisoned them against me," she said. "They'll never forgive you." I saved it, not as evidence, just as reminder of how far denial can reach. Irene tried too. A message about family and forgiveness, laced with the sound of coins clinking in the background. I archived it. Not everything deserves an answer. At the dinner table, the kids asked what would change. I told them the truth. Nothing here. We'll keep living. We'll keep deciding what belongs to us. They nodded, each in their own way, and we let the night end with homework and pasta and a dog begging under the table. Normal on purpose. There wasn't a clean ending, just a new understanding. I don't audition for roles I already live. I don't explain myself to people who prefer absence to accountability. I keep records, I keep receipts, I keep silence. They thought quiet meant weak. They learned the difference.